Hey, this is Brett, and we are continuing the Bosnia list. Um, Please like and subscribe. And this is Chapter 5, Dhaka Enter Uzi, Birchkau, Bosnia, August 1992. Peeking through Mom's white curtains on a boiling hot Tuesday afternoon at the end of the summer, I was frightened by a tall, bleached blonde lady in fatigues and white Adidas inspecting our courtyard. Her index finger hovered over the trigger of an Uzi machine gun. At 11, I was learning the distinctions between the dozen different weapons Serb military men carried, but I'd never seen a woman soldier before. Everything about her screamed trouble. I lay flat against the floor and closed my eyes tight. For 4 months, we'd hidden inside with no electricity, running water or phone, and little food. The endless shooting kept us from the balcony. We crawled on the floor to move from room to room. Since, as far as we knew, we were the only Muslim family left in town, we barely opened the windows and spoke in whispers so our Serb enemies in the apartments surrounding us on all sides wouldn't hear. I missed boating on the River Sava with Dad during the warm months, and swimming, lessons, and karate camp. Everything good had been taken away, replaced with worries that hurt my head. Because a young boy was less likely to get harassed by the military men patrolling the streets of Birchkau, it became my job to keep our canisters filled with water and to buy bread with the dwindling wad of bills Mom took out of her sock or bra. The liquor in the cabinet was gone, replaced by a bowl of coins that was getting smaller each week. Whenever I left home, I was afraid I'd be shot and return home to find my family gone. I had no friends anymore, no sports, no chance to run around. I couldn't even listen to music or watch my favorite action movies on the VCR. Eldon stayed quiet in his candle-lit room, relaying tiny bits of news he'd heard on the Free Territory radio. All he told us was the fighting had intensified throughout Bosnia. No word of a ceasefire, prisoner exchanges in Birchkau, or international intervention. Evenings were the worst, sweltering, spooky, and pitch dark. Every male voice could be a soldier coming to take away Dad and Eldon. After each thud, a footstep on stairs, Mom would say, "Shh, be quiet," and I would think silently, this could be it. Any visitor might spell the end. The blonde Amazon strutting in front of the building looked directly into our window and pointed her finger, showing our place to the huge armed soldier next to her. It was 5 in the afternoon. These two were obviously looking for us. Someone had given up my family. My hands went clammy. I slithered to the kitchen where my mom was sitting on the floor, splitting a sardine can so my brother and I would each get 2 little fish. I told her what I'd seen. She sneaked out to the window to spy on the bleached blonde who was walking up the steps with the giant who reminded me of an action hero. He must have been 6'7", broad and blonde. From their perch on the stairs, Dalibor and Velibor stared in awe at the sight of these oversized warriors. "Notice," Mom said. "Keka, Eldon, they're coming to get you again." I hid behind her, grabbing her arm. We heard a loud knock. We didn't know what to do. If we ignored them, they could shoot through the door. Mom's hand was shaking, and she bit her lip before letting them in. "Good day, how are you?" she asked in a formal way. Without a word of greeting, they barged in, the man so tall he had to duck to pass through the door's frame. In the foyer, they snooped around. "I am Dhaka, and this is my husband, Boban," the blonde said. With her sleek weapon, slicked back hair, and red lipstick, she was like a female cyborg from a foreign adventure flick. "I'm Ada, this is Kika." My mom used my parents' nicknames. "These are my sons, Eldon and Keenan." This angry Serb couple, clearly younger than my parents, stalked through our living room, matching Uzis draped over their shoulders. They plopped down on the sofa like they owned the place. He was so tall that when he sat, his knees poked up above the cushion. His green camouflage pant legs were tucked inside his black mid-calf boots. 2 olive green hand grenades hung on the right side of his brown belt. When my mother saw them, she flinched. My parents sat down on the other sofa. Dad was being very quiet. Eldon crossed his knees on the floor. Why were these visitors here? What did they want? We'd been taught to respect elders, but the war had destroyed all the rules. I pretended to play with my miniature cars, racing my American Mack truck, Ford police cruiser, and red Bosnian Yugo. Since I was closest to Dhaka, I sneaked peeks at her black automatic. I'd never once seen one so close before. The pointed muzzle looked lethal. The bullet cartridges were longer than the handle. A few dozen rounds of ammo could fit in there. We are all from Belgrade, and I fought in the Croatian War last year. We are good friends of Arkan, Bolden boasted. His speech was stilted, as if he was reciting from a script. On his shoulder was the patch of Arkan's Tigers, the militia notorious for swooping in after battles to kill civilians, rape women, and loot houses. Most recently, I was in western Bosnia, where I got my boots bloody walking over dead Muslim bodies. He smirked, pulling a pack of Drina cigarettes from his pocket, sparking one with a Zippo lighter. My mother ran to get him an ashtray. He could wipe us all out in seconds with one pull of his trigger. A minute later, when he leaned forward to flick his ashes, my elbow bumped against the grenades on his belt, and I saw Mom close her eyes. She was probably praying that they wouldn't dislodge, roll onto our carpet, and blow us all up. We're now residing in Birchkal, Dhaka said, across the street from the church. Do you know Sanela Delic? She pulled her own pack of Drinas from her pocket. My mother gasped, I do know her. We went to school together. Had they slaughtered Sanela when they'd moved into our friend's furnished 3-story house? It was just a 10-minute walk from here. Were they going to shoot us too? We heard Sanela went abroad, Dhaka said, taking her husband's Zippo to light her smoke and take a drag. She got lipstick on the filter. Local officials gave us the addresses of wealthy, undamaged properties where no one lives anymore. That made me feel better. I hoped Dhaka was just stealing from Bosniaks who were killed or sent away or had fled, and not shooting them dead herself. She looked over at Eldon. How old is he? Eldon. 18, Eldon replied boldly. He looked like he can fight for us, she said. I glanced at Eldon, then smashed my Mack truck against the Yugo, worried they were here to force my brother to fight for them, digging trenches and picking up the dead, until they shot him dead too. My forehead felt hot, my ears tingled. The combination of heat, smoke, hunger, and fear was making me dizzy. Dhaka turned to Dad. Why aren't you fighting? Rather than answer, I wished we could join the Bosnian army and kill scumbags like you, but every time we tried to escape, we flunked. He said nothing. We attempted to leave 5 times, my mother jumped in, but we were turned back at checkpoints and at the border. Eldon and Keka were recently released from Luka. We were never in a political party, so we didn't think we had any reason to flee. We had nothing against Serbs. We would not hurt a soul. She sounded desperate, pleading for our lives. I'm a mother. I just want my boys. Boban was scowling, but Dhaka inched closer to her, nodding as if Mom was getting through her skull. Can I get you some coffee? That would be lovely, Dhaka said, pursing her red lips. I joined Mom in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of warm water from the canister, while she used the last of our beans and propane gas to make Dhaka coffee. I went back to the floor as she served the adults on her good china as if she was just entertaining old friends who'd come by to catch up. Boban glared at my father. "What do you do?" "I trained athletes at my own fitness center." I noticed Dad used the past tense. Was his job over from now on? "Do you own a gun?" Boban barked. "No." Dad was lying. I knew he'd bought a revolver after the Croatian War started 5 months earlier, because I'd heard Mom yell at him to get rid of it. He'd refused, saying that he needed to protect us. She insisted he stash the weapon at his office. Some protection like it could have stood up to these twin Nazis, or Uzis. While Mom and Daka spoke, Boban never stopped glowering. Then Daka said, "We'll be back," she said, like Arnold Schwarzenegger threatened in The Terminator. With that, they barged out. "Human garbage," Dad muttered. "Thank God they didn't take you away." Mom looked sheet white. How do you work this grenade?" I asked Father. "You squeeze the lever?" He nodded. "Then you pulled the safety pin out. Some explode on contact with the ground," he said. "Others 3 seconds after you release the lever." My father had done his mandatory service in the Yugoslavian People's Army when he was 18. He knew about these things. The next day, at the same time, Daka kept her promise to return. As she opened the door, my mother was standing very straight, her back tensed. Daka still had her Uzi, but she was alone this time. She handed Mom a bag of coffee. My mother relaxed. If Daka was going to shoot us or take Dad and Eldon away, she would have come with her menacing husband instead of a gift. "Ada, make us a cup." Daka sat in a fond way, like she and Mom were close. As they drank and chatted, I swayed back and forth, leaning on the rocking chair in the living room, pretending I was a little kid, but listening hard. What was she doing back here? "Can I see the rest of your apartment?" I heard Daka ask. "Your building has a good location." My mother gave her a tour. "You have a classy style. You could help with my new place." Did she want Mom for her decorator or slave? "I like decorating," Mom said as they sat back down with us. "Your chandelier would fit nicely in my Belgrade home," Daka smiled. Mom looked at Dad. His eyes were helpless, dim as rocks. My parents had picked out the gold antique fixture with its 12 frosted bulbs 4 years before at Chap, a furniture store. It was a splurge to celebrate Dad's opening his gym and Mom's promotion at her company. The chandelier had been installed before we moved into the new apartment complex. My mother fed the construction workers beef stew and cokes, so ours was the first home they'd finished. She loved that light. When I'd bounce a ball in the dining room, she'd yell, "Don't you dare break my chandelier! It cost me 3 months of work." Now she asked Daka calmly, "Would you like it?" "Yes, Kika can take it down. He can bring it over to us this weekend." Daka caught her gun strap from sliding down her shoulder. "Let's finish our coffee first." This was all she wanted, our lamp? I didn't know why she'd asked, when she could have just pointed the gun and taken it. Were we supposed to pretend it was a gift? Puro had taught us about betrayal. Petra had broken us into the ways of Serbian thievery. Our old next-door neighbor was more interested in free loot she could lift easily, like Mom's clothes, small artwork, and the round carpet. Daka, with her bigger eyes, set her sights on major appliances and fixtures that required hammers and screwdrivers to unhinge. It was as if we were watching our happy lives get dismantled and erased one item at a time. The plants were all dead, the blinds were down. With so much stuff missing, our home looked spotty and discombobulated, as though it was undergoing construction. By now we understood Daka's subliminal message. Hand over the rest of your valuables or return in Eldon and Dad. It was getting easier to let go of things. We told ourselves we'd be leaving here soon. On Friday, Daka returned with Bulban and a cart for Dad to transport our light. She surprised me with a bag of black licorice. I chewed a few pieces, then threw one to Eldon. I knew they were bad guys robbing us, but I hadn't had a sweet in months. It tasted good and chewy in my mouth. I popped in another. I liked red licorice better. I hoped she'd bring me that next time. Keaton looks like my little boy, Daka said. He's staying with his grandmother. I gave her the sweetest smile. If she called me by my name and saw me like her son, she wouldn't hurt me, and I'd get more candy. And I'd bet she'd even protect us if Pirro and his soldiers came back. I went with Dad to the dining room to dismantle the overhead fixture. He held a screwdriver and stepped onto a chair. I'll hold your feet so you don't fall when you unscrew the nails. Wish I could unscrew her head from her shoulders, he whispered. Back in the living room, Boban was standing, his gun still over his shoulder. Daka was sprawled out on the couch, her Uzi on the pillow next to her like some kind of pet. I came and sat down beside her. I could smell the oil she lubricated the gun with and the leather from her holster. I have one too, I said. I'll show you. I ran to my room and brought back the gun case where I'd parked my water pistol. She laughed. Where'd you get the holster? I found it outside. Keenan can come with his father to drop it off, Daka told Mom. Please keep them safe, Mom pleaded to Daka, who nodded, looking at our dismantled light. I walked outside, alongside Dad as he wheeled the wagon transporting the fixture to our Bosniak friend's stolen home. Boban led. Daka walked behind, gripping her gun. I feel like their prisoner. I feel like donkey, I told him, and he winked. When Daka opened her garage door, I was stunned to see haphazard stacks of television sets, VCRs, stereos, typewriters, tables, lamps, chairs, large framed build paintings, bikes. She was warehousing merchandise. Wow, so much loot. So many Muslims' homes robbed. If Petra's apartment was like the corner store, Daka had a whole mall stuffed in here. As Boban went inside, Daka thanked us for helping her steal from us. Then she walked me and Dad home, staying close by us, keeping her promise to Mom to protect us. Fuck her mother, the ugly bitch, Dad said later. Yeah, fuck her mother, I repeated, wishing Dad would beat her up. Let her crawl back into her mother's cunt with those maggots, he muttered. I'd never heard Dad say bad words like that, especially about a woman. He was usually a gentleman, an expert tango dancer with polite manners who'd open doors and carry bags for Mom. He used to warn me and Eldon, don't ever let a woman have anything bad to say about you. In photographs with his jazz band before he married at 36, he was always in a snazzy suit, his arms around a pretty girl. He'd bring carnations to Mom, Aunt Basira, and even Grandma Zakia, though Mom and Zakia should fly away on her broom. Though Mom said Zakia should fly away on her broom. I didn't figure out what that meant until I saw a Bosnian witch cartoon. Later in the week, Daka came by with more coffee for Mom and 4 pieces of bazooka gum that she slipped into my pocket. I gave 2 to Eldon. She told Mom of her parents in Belgrade, how much she missed her son. After an hour, she pointed to Mom's lace tablecloth, a special housewarming present that Grandma Emina had embroidered for us the year before. That's pretty. Where did you get it? Daka fingered the ivory lace. I need one for my new table. I looked at Mom, not wanting Daka to have it. Grandma Emina would be upset. This is old. There's newer ones. Mom rushed to the drawer, frantically pulling out a neatly pressed stack of newer cloths she'd bought. Which fits your table? Daka took 3, but thankfully left us Grandma's old one. That night, Mom was so grateful, she bent down on her knees, kissing the hem of her Emily's gift. I missed Grandmother, who baked me cookies, called me Honey Bun, and took care of me when Mom was working. I hope she was okay. We could hear bombs exploding in the south toward the suburbs, where we'd heard Emina had fled 4 months ago. With the phone lines cut off, we had no way of knowing whether she was safe. If they bombed the house where she was staying, I was afraid the rubble would collapse on top of her. The next week, Daka took Mom's prized iron from Germany. Losing the iron didn't kill me, but Dad was fuming. Those cowardly savages, Dad spat. It's not like there's electricity for the iron to work anyway, I said. I didn't understand why Daka and Boban didn't just get a van to cart everything away. Eldon thought they wanted to be less conspicuous. Ripping stuff off piecemeal would keep it under the radar of the military brass. As long as they don't hurt us, Mom reassured, our lives are more important. Soon, Daka's eyes became even larger. I really like your home, she said one evening, her gun on the coffee table. She didn't need to ask us to get out. She could just shoot us and move in. Why don't they? I asked later. My parents didn't know. Eldon said there was a difference between a crook and a murderer. I wanted to think that Daka and Boban saw we were a nice, decent, harmless family without a bad bone. A few days later, when Daka returned with Boban, she asked, When are you leaving? We want to, Mom said, but nobody will help us get out. Now I was starting to get the game we were playing. We would trade our stuff and our place if they'd help us escape Bosnia, but then Dad blew it. We could cross the front lines to free territory in a prisoner exchange, he added. Shit. I knew instantly Dad shouldn't have said that. It was obvious as soon as he crossed over, he'd pick up a gun. He'd basically just admitted he wanted to shoot Boban. Aha, so you want to fight against us? Boban raised his voice, standing up, towering 2 heads over Dad, who turned red. When the giant put his hand on his Uzi, I thought he was going to shoot Dad. I gasped, but he just adjusted his strap. Daka smirked at Dad's screw-up. Wouldn't you want to be with your mother? Mom asked. We miss the rest of our family. Boban sat back down and lit a cigarette. He took a few drags, then stubbed it out and left. I emptied the ashtray in silence and took a deep breath. Thank God they didn't hear about Dad's revolver, Eldon told me. What revolver? It was the first I'd ever heard of it. He'd never mentioned having a weapon in the apartment to me before. Any non-Serb with a registered gun is labeled dangerous. Dangerous, resistor, and shot dead. Dad was on the list. Eldon later filled me in. But Stevo, the Serb volleyball player Dad trained, came by when you were out getting water. Stevo told Dad, give me your gun now, quickly. Anybody else but me would kill you. Remember, Keka, I was never here. Though the gun was long gone, it made me question why my father had gotten it when he'd told us we'd be safe here. Was he pretending for us or himself? A brave Muslim doctor we knew had given us a piece of thread with knots that his mother had sanctified with Islamic prayers to keep evil spirits away. We hung it by our door. This sacred present must have had a protective powers. Either that or Dad had 9 lives, but I wondered what other secrets he was hiding and lying to me about. Over the next 6 months, Daka stopped by every day, bringing me treats and Mom coffee beans, which she ground and added to boiling water. It was a ritual. They'd drink it together, Then whatever lights, chairs, cookery, or glasses left in our home that Daka wanted, my mother gave her. At the same time, though, Daka befriended Mom. She showed us picture of her mother and her son who looked like me. I guess that even thieves get lonely. When Boban showed up, he'd try to intimidate us by saying he was becoming the chief of police in Birchkow and bragging how many Muslims he'd murdered that week. But I noticed that other military men in the building came back from the trenches muddy, dirty, and exhausted. Boban looked rested. His boots were clean, even in the rain. "I think he's a pussy," Eldon said. "If we hear mortar shells and explosions all day, then what's he doing sitting here having coffee with us? I bet he's waiting for the battle to end so he can steal from the pockets of dead soldiers." We developed the theory that Boban and Daka were grifters from Belgrade, aiming to get rich from war profiteering. They may have killed civilians in a botched robbery, but Eldon was skeptical that either had seen combat. I didn't know how to feel about Daka. She talked about her little boy a lot. She clearly loved him. She was gentle with me. I noticed under her huge fatigues she was thin, with narrow shoulders and a flat chest. I didn't think she was a killer. The uniform she wore reminded me of a costume for a dangerous role she was playing. Still, they were armed Serbs, figured to be feared. Downstairs in the stairwell, when I went out to get water and bread, I heard my old Serb classmates say how cool and strong Daka and Boban were. "Man, they're dangerous," Velibor said, impressed that they were Arkan soldiers. When Daka caressed our white marble table over coffee, we knew that was next to go. It was a present from rich Uncle Ahmet. He'd driven Mom to an antique store in the suburbs to pick it out. Dad and I loaded up the carriage and took Ahmet's table to Daka's garage. Dad looked bitter. There was no end to this humiliation, as if we had to forfeit every object we'd ever valued, one piece at a time, until none were left. But I wanted more of Daka's candy and her protection. "Is that the same Uzi Sylvester Stallone had in Cobra?" I asked her one day. She nodded and smiled. I showed her my collection of bullets and shrapnel. "I pulled that one hot out of the wall." "That was brave," she said. "I have more sweets for you. Come for a walk, and bring that painted bull." It was a gift Dad had bought Mom on his trip to Romania with his volleyball team. She kept it in a glass cabinet. She liked it even more than the huge wheel of cheese he'd brought back from Hungary. "Be careful of Daddy's present," Mom said. It was sad to see it go, but I'd never been to Daka's without my father. I looked at Mom. "Go with her." Mom shooed me toward her. We now felt sure Daka wouldn't cause me harm. I was her favorite. I even thought Mom was using me to soften her up. As I crossed the courtyard with Daka, my former pals Igor, Velibor, and Delibor stopped their soccer game to watch us. They didn't say a mean word. They were scared of her. She was my shield. If she liked me, that gave me power. I imagined telling her who had bullied me so she'd punish my foes and make them stop picking on me. I felt more important and cool. The only boy she bought licorice, bazooka, and chunga-lunga bubble gum with stickers. When we walked into her place, Boban wasn't there. In the kitchen, I found piles of bonbons, chocolate bars, gum, and Kiki-Riki Chewy candy, the kind of stash you'd find under a Christmas tree. But no stores around here had any candy left. I realized right then that she must have never gone out to buy me anything. All her treats she'd brought over she'd just grabbed from the stack of stuff she'd stolen from Muslim homes. She had bought my affection with dirty candy. I now hated myself for eating. My hunger and greed had caused me to betray my own people. I helped Daka carry my father's Romanian bull to her stolen bedroom. It was packed with boxes, yet more loot. To thank me, she kissed me on the cheek with her painted lips. When she went to the bathroom, I looked in the mirrored cabinet and saw the red stain she made on my face. I wiped it off. Sitting down on her sofa, I spotted her Uzi on the dresser with an extra clip, the upside showing. I imagined flipping open the bathroom door and shooting Daka right in her face. Then I'd quietly sneak out. Would my family be proud? No, they'd be scared for our lives. But if no one heard the gun or saw me leave, I bet I could get away with it. When Boban found his wife dead in the bathroom, on the bathroom tile, he'd think it was an inside job that one of their own had offed her. Surely they were competing with other looters. He'd never guess that it was the innocent, scared, 5'2", 100-pound, 11-and-a-half-year-old little boy she'd given stolen chocolates. Yet I could see Daka driving our entire family to safety. What if she was the only Serb who would help us get out? In the living room, she caught me eyeing her slender, pitch black submachine gun. "Here, you want to hold it, honey?" She handed me her weapon. "It's loaded, be careful." I held it with both hands, looking up at her. It was heavier than I expected. My heart lurched as I pictured blasting her in the chest, her thin body wrecked, walls splattered with blood. Daka stood above me, one arm resting on her waist. She smirked. I stared at her. I didn't smile back. I felt stronger than she was, like Stallone in Cobra, the movie Dad took me to see twice. Her smirk vanished. She squinted as if she could see what I wanted to do to her. She snatched the weapon back and said, "Time to go." She slid a mid-thigh bayonet onto her wide brown military belt. Before tucking the Uzi back inside, she took a 9mm round brass bullet from an extra clip. "Here, you can have this as a souvenir." She handed it to me in her open palm. I was psyched. I didn't have that kind yet. "Thanks." I slipped it into my pocket. She handed me a box of waffle hazelnut cookies. It had probably been confiscated from a Bosniak's home too, but I ripped the box open and ate 3 anyway. They were warm and crunchy and delicious. She watched, looking pleased to be the one giving me treats. On the way home, I kept thinking I'd almost become a murderer today. I didn't even feel bad. I would like to be a real good cop, getting the scum. It would be like I would be like a good cop getting a scumbag criminal off the street. I was sure I could have gotten away with killing Daka. I'd just take her weapon with me and walk behind the house to the banks of the River Sava. There I'd wait for nightfall and swim to freedom in Croatia. Freedom would be worth the risk of getting shot or stepping on a landmine. "You okay?" Dad said when I got home. "Yeah, just dropped the bull. Everything's fine." Dropped off the bull. Everything's fine. I handed him the cookies, not mentioning my dance with Daka's Uzi. It was the first real secret I ever kept from my father.